Hi, I'm Joan Goodchild. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Security Sessions, where we talk to security leaders who are shaping the trends and topics in the cybersecurity industry. Today, we're going to be joined by Kevin Powers. He is with Boston College. He is the faculty director and lecturer in law for Masters of Legal Studies in Cybersecurity, Risk, and Governance. And Kevin actually brings with him a wide amount of experience, 25 years in national security, law enforcement, military, as well as in the private sector. So we're excited to talk to him about what's shaping cybersecurity education today. So welcome, Kevin.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.
So tell me a little bit about, right there too. You've worn a lot of hats over the years. You're former Navy, national security, private sector work. Tell us a little bit, if you can, about kind of where you've been and what brought you to what you're doing today.
Well, one thing you left out is when I was in college, I drove a bus for the T.
Oh, okay.
So I can tell you where I was going, and it was in circles at that time.
You really earned your stripes there then too, huh?
Yeah. So I began my career with the U.S. Marshal Service as an analyst. Then I moved over to the U.S. Attorney's Office as a law clerk. And then I went off in the Navy JAG Corps, and it was fantastic. And how I got into education was at that time. In 2002, I moved over to the U.S. Naval Academy down in Annapolis, Maryland, where I became the Deputy General Counsel to the superintendent. And at that point, they allowed me to teach my first course. It was a leadership course to the midshipmen, and then they allowed me to create my own course. And then I got the bug, where I really loved teaching, and I continue to do so. When I worked as a lawyer down in D.C. and up here in Boston, I continue to teach at Boston University and over at Northeastern and down at the Naval Justice School in Newport. And, and then I found my way, really practicing law, like how I got into cybersecurity and data privacy. Like everyone in my age group, I fell into it. It began right around 2007 timeframe. Mm-hmm. The firm I was at, we were taking in all the case files from one of our big clients internally. So we started looking at privacy issues. We weren't talking cybersecurity, but it was really data privacy. Yeah. In 2011, I was pulled out of civilian practice and was working down in D.C., where I was called in to be a legal advisor on the 9/11 co-conspirator trials, the USS Cold Bomber. This was all under the Obama administration, where they were looking to move everything from DOJ over to the Department of Defense. And my role in it was to get these to arraignment, which we did. And during that time, it was just, you started seeing more. It was national security, had data privacy, and cyber was popping up more and more. And when I left there, I was in-house, and it was just cyber nonstop, for a tech company I was working on. And during that time, that's how I started building this whole program. Yeah, right. And now, okay, so let's talk about the program then. It was originally launched in 2017, was it? No, it was actually close. 2014. 2014. Yeah. In 2015, we officially launched the program. And at that time, it was a Master's of Science in Cybersecurity Policy and Governance. And when we built that, if I planned this never happens. There's just no way. It was more, I got back up from D.C. I reached out to the dean of the Woods College, Father Burns, and said, hey, I'm back up here. I'd like to teach a course. If you have one open, I'm happy to help. If not, well, that's fine too. He said, sure, I get this course. One of the judges who usually teaches it in the summer, can you teach this course? I taught this course. And then he said, hey, I know your background. We're looking to do a cybersecurity or a forensic course. Do you mind being on this task force? And this was in November 2014. So I went to this meeting. Long story short, they were looking at like a grad type program, but they were really focused on technical aspects. And I was sitting there and I just, piped up and said, well, wait a minute, I look at cybersecurity. It's not just a tech issue. You hear that all the time now. Back then, you really didn't. Yeah. And I just said, we're Boston College. We're interdisciplinary. We have great liberal arts. We have one of the best business schools. We have one of the great law schools. We shouldn't be a tech program because that's not really what cybersecurity is about. If you're going to build something, let's build it this way and focus on what a CISO does and then build the courses accordingly and go backwards, to which we did. And I thought that was going to be a 15-year process. And maybe I'll get a course in my retirement job and it wasn't. Within less than probably 10 months, I got a call from the dean, and I was actually down in Disney World with my 4 kids and my wife, and I was getting ready to go on Space Mountain, and he just said, hey, we're going to launch this program and you're going to run it. And I said, all right, great. I am all up for it. I'll call you back in 30 seconds. Went on Space Mountain, came back, and next thing you know, we're kicking off this program, the master's program. And then it was like proof of concept. And, we're at the law school now. And the whole idea was we're going to build this program. Let's see where it goes. And we'll make a determination on where should it land within the university. Should it go to law school? Should it go to the business school? Should it stay at arts and sciences? So with that, over the first 5 years, we really start, and this is where everything's going to. If you look at the compliance, the regulatory, the artificial intelligence, the governance, it really was the best option is to go to the law school. And we started to move over there like we put our foot over there. We started cross-listing classes. So what that means is we had, at one point, and now 5 of our classes are cross-listed with the law school, meaning there's law students in the classes as well as our grad students.
Sure, yeah.
And we made the decision, and I say we, at the university level, the dean of the law school, the provost's office, that, hey, we're going to move this over here and we're going to change it to from a master's of science to a master's of legal studies. And then over the last 2 years, we had a curriculum review. We had a curriculum committee work on it. I won't say we updated course. It was more we aligned courses and we aligned the curriculum to be a master's of legal studies, which we just launched, the new program this 3 weeks ago at Boston College Law School. So now that's where we're host.
So what do you think that says about the role of the security leader or the CISO now that, this is kind of where, it made more sense for the program to live and the kind of responsibilities that, today's security leader needs to be mindful of? Yeah.
And I think and security leaders understand that now too. It's no longer you're just a technologist. It's a business position. Cybersecurity, if you look at all the regulations right now, is a core business function. And as a core business function, you have to understand the board of directors, the C-suite, the business line, the risk, the operations. Tech, it's a spoke there. And then you have physical security, you have data privacy, artificial intelligence, and governance, and all that brings, and then dealings with law enforcement and others. So you have to be a business person as well as a technologist. So when you look at us coming here, it's the people in the classroom. We have technologists in there. We have business folks. We have lawyers in the classroom. We have law enforcement people. We have military. They're all talking together, and that's what you want. So you look at the security professional of today, and then tomorrow it's going to be someone who understands the technology. They don't have to be a coder,
right?
Okay, but they have to understand the technology, the architecture, but then they have to understand their role within the organization, understand the business, and then really be an ambassador out there as well.
Well, and you've also pointed out the CISO role and, again, other security leaders, whether it's the CISO or the VP or security, and, a lot of these other titles that now exist really need to understand the legal and regulatory frameworks that they're working within too. And that's an important part, do you think, of education for, people that are in the role now or looking for higher education?
Yeah. The framework itself, when you're building out your cyber program, is really almost like a legal document. If you look at it from a regulatory standpoint, a good example is the New York DFS Part 500 has amended. Everything you do in there is a legal aspect, how you build your policy, how you build your program, what you do, because they're going to come in, and if something happens, that's how they're going to look at it with a legal eye. Well, you say you're doing this, why did you do that? So you have to have the capabilities to understand when you're building a cyber program, how does it match up with the different frameworks and what's the legal consequences? But you shouldn't be building any program just fine. I tell my students all the time, you don't want to be just building something so you don't get in trouble. The reason you're building your program is to protect your business operations and then your non-public customer data. That's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. Now, talk to me, too, about educating, the workforce for cybersecurity, current needs in the future. It's somewhat controversial within the industry to say that there's a skills gap. A lot of people feel like this is more of a misunderstanding, or it's about managing the expectations of employers. That where they're hiring, they're not necessarily addressing what's out there in the market for workforce. And then those who are trying to get into the industry say that their expectations are different from what they actually have for an education and so forth. Are you trying to square that at all in this program?
We try to square that away for our students. They're entering more mid-level or higher,
Yeah.
because it's how you come into the program. And then I'll answer your question is, if you look at our program, I think the average age is 33, but then like 20% of the students are fifth year. So we have like a fifth year program with Boston College where the students are coming in. And then you have the middle, and then you have people who are in their late 40s, early 50s, very senior. So depending on their experiences, that's where they go. So if someone is a senior vice president doing risk at a bank, well, they're going to graduate from the program. They're going to end up being whether a deputy CISO or a VP of information security, and the middle person too, they're moving in those roles. So a junior person, they're not going to end up as an analyst. They're typically going to go in as an assistant information security officer or something like that. I think the issues that you're addressing, this is all human resources, and that goes to being siloed. Okay, so if you have the CISOs looking for a position, the problem is HR, and I'm not bagging on HR by any means, but this is just the problem. They look and say, okay, this is what we want. And if they're looking for an analyst, like an entry-level position, if you read the job description, it's for a CISO, and you're not going to get anyone to fill those. Or they'll say, like, we want 5 or 6 years of experience. Well, how is anyone graduating from college or someone going to a community college, with an associate degree, going to get 7 years of experience? So then that cycle goes on. What I'm finding out there, I think there is a gap. Clearly there is. But this is a problem too. Yeah. And then it pushes people away from going into cybersecurity. Why would I want to even go there? I can't even get a job.
Yeah. So going back to the education of the program itself, though, where it is kind of more that mid-career professional, in your observation or what you might be hearing from professionals that are coming into it, is what kind of skills and understanding and education and so forth were they perhaps not able to get at the beginning of their career that they're really craving now to take that next step?
It's the whole idea of you start with cybersecurity. I was a history major in college. So if you said cybersecurity to anyone who's liberal arts, like, I don't know tech. Yeah. I don't want to touch it. Right. I'm lucky I can work the TV clicker. That's the classic line, right? And now they understand, or there's a recognition because they're hearing more of, hey, I don't need to be a technologist per se. I can be someone who has a communications background, political science. I can have a history background, have a law background. Whatever my background is, I can help because there's a position for you. So knowing that, where can I get in this field? Because there's so many opportunities within the field right now, whether it's in the private sector or in the government. These jobs are going to be there for a long time because there's always going to be someone trying to break in and get, hurt your systems or steal your data and extort you for money.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What kind of, trends, like how are you adapting to what is being discussed in boardrooms and in organizations, within security divisions too, to ensure that you're really making sure that it's timely? Of course, everybody is talking about what they're doing with AI, how they're getting ROI from their AI investments and so forth. I mean, how do you kind of update the curriculum to make sure that you're hitting on those trends now?
Well, luckily in cybersecurity, you have to update the curriculum every
week.
semester. It's just like, look at the headline, there's some new law or a new issue out there. But with the artificial intelligence, that has, like any organizations, overwhelmed our program. It is integral to everything we do in the program. And the key to our program is the governance, right? You start with that. So when you were asking about AI governance, we're looking at that and talking to students too. Like, yeah, you want to bring AI into your business, but when you do it, it's not just to do it like, hey, we're bringing it in, let's go run with it. It has to be, okay, why are we going to bring it in here? How's this going to help our business? And how are we going to be strategic about bringing it in here? And I think that's what you see in boardrooms right now. Some boards are very strategic. They're holding back. They're focused on the security, the privacy, the business operations. And then others are, hey, I see nothing here. We're not going to use artificial intelligence all. You're on your own. Or you guys figure it out, go use it. And then we'll see how it goes. And those other two right there, they're going to fail. I mean, they're bringing in AI, and then it's not a closed environment, it's an open environment. All the trade secrets are going out into the internet, and they're bringing all sorts of code into the systems that, just going to hurt them.
So in terms of, we talked about the role of the CISO and the security leader earlier too, but, going back to that as well, I mean, it's definitely evolved. As you said, it's not a technical role, that's part of it, but it goes much broader than that. As part of executive education, which is, what your program speaks to. Do you hear more about the CISO having more audience with the board or having, a seat at the table? We've been talking about this now for 2 decades about whether or not that's an executive that reports into the CEO or still up to the CIO. And those conversations, it seems like, still continue.
Yeah, those conversations will still continue, but the CISO is getting in front of the board. Yeah. They're in their quarterly, they're at the finance committee or audit committees. You might have a committee that's, emerging technologies or whatever. They're there. And if you look at the 10Ks that are coming out, you'll see from the different boards, the Fortune 50, what they're saying is like, oh, how does the board fulfill its oversight responsibilities? We get briefings, quarterly by our CISO. We get trainings they're talking about the CISO. So the CISO is elevated. Are they going to get into that C-suite? I don't know, but they're definitely getting in front of the board, and they're definitely getting in front of the CEO a lot as well. I think what you might see, and I could be wrong on this, but it just seems like you're seeing before was the breakup of the CIO and the CISO position. I think you're going to see that coming back together because the CIO is already up there, right? So how do you get the CISO up there? So it might be a combination of both.
So also on, the topic of trends, again, AI, something that a lot of CISOs are talking about now, investing in, trying to figure out how to demonstrate the ROI on those investments too. From your vantage point and, what you hear in working with the program and hearing about what these people who are looking for executive education in cybersecurity are focused on, what do you think the next big thing is? If we're looking 3-4 years out, are things changing? Is AI still a primary part of the conversation, or as that becomes widely adopted, is it on to something else?
Wow, that's so very topical. I was at a retreat out in Vail, Colorado last week, and it was with a private equity firm hosted, and you had all these investment bankers there. And that question came up, where AI is going. And there was just this whole talk of it's going to really impact business, impact the profession. Okay, so that's very general. But they really talked about the SaaS platforms that with the coding that it's capable to do. And I'm not a coder, I'm not a technologist, but what they talked about is that you'd be able to build your own CRM. In minutes, so you would have someone who's working there and is like, okay, we want to do this. So instead of buying your own CRM, you're buying the software as a service, you're going to be able to do that. And you're going to be able to do that with other elements that you're already purchasing. You're building your own individualized, unique to your business, which is amazing to me. And then my thought, and then they also talked about everyone having their own personal Jarvis from Iron Man, which sounds fantastic until you go okay, great. So what happens if that gets hacked into? Every dark secret you may have, every personal thing you even do is now in someone else's hands, and think of how they could extort you or cause trouble for you or just raid all your bank accounts. So it sounds great in theory. I think the problem, everything is, as we're humans, is we move without thinking. We always say we're gonna move slowly. If you remember with AI, there was an executive order. We're gonna move slowly, and now it's let's move as fast as we can. We're going to be the best at this. And it's the old Silicon Valley of don't worry, be crappy, get first to market.
Right. And also the issue of the more convenient and connected things become, the larger the attack surface grows.
Right. It is. And I think everyone forgets that artificial intelligence is a technology, and any technology can be hacked.
Right.
So it's not going to cure everything. Yeah, great. It's going to make things faster. I think there's going to be a lot of displacement in different positions, but there's going to be other positions that open up as well. You're going to have a lot of people who are managing artificial intelligence.
Good point. Okay, unpopular opinion, the thing we ask everybody. Tell us, what's a controversial viewpoint that you might have specific to, this career or the executive in this position that, tell us what something that you think that others might disagree with, but you'll die on that hill.
I don't know if I'll die on the hill. But so one for me is there's been a lot of talk, and this is more on the government and running cybersecurity. There's been a lot of talk of recently where now there's going to be these block grants to states to secure different municipalities, the different agencies within, and there's a lot of folks who are against that. For me, I look at it, well, if they're going to do this, why this could be a good thing, as long as it's uniform, meaning that it's not like you give $1 billion to one state and they get to build out their program one way and someone it's no, we're going to give the money out and we're going to have these different requirements in place and it's going to be uniform across the board. I'm going to have one federal person or two or a team managing this. I think this is a great program for the states in general because now you're going to have this money and you're going to be able to secure municipalities, the different police departments, different agencies. Right before, you couldn't have CISA do that. You couldn't have different federal agencies do that. Instead, now you're giving the money to the states to build out their program. They have certain requirements like, you have to do a cyber assessment. Once you have that, this is what you need to do, and you're getting the money that way, but you're building it out. If you look at the towns and the smaller cities or even the city of Boston, they're not spending the money on cybersecurity or data privacy that they need to. If they're getting this funding, from the states, and then you have people who work there and live in this, they're going to build out good programs. They're going to have the playbook to do that, and they're going to have the money to support it. So I look at it as a good thing because it's coming back to the states, and the states are going to secure it. And it's really the municipalities. You can go to any one of them; they'll tell you they're secure. But I'm not bashing anyone in particular. But they're not going to be where they need to be on the cyber front. They're there where they are with the technology to run a town, not to secure it.
Yeah.
They might have things in place, but they're very highly breachable.
Yeah, and that's a conversation I feel like too that we've had about, there is a significant gap, from my lens as a cybersecurity journalist between what municipalities are doing or even government, is always kind of considered to be somewhat behind. And there's so much discussion now about critical infrastructure too, which sometimes rolls into those budgets, and kind of how you come up with the dollars to be able to really cover that.
Right, and I just look at New England, you look at Massachusetts, we have all these schools here. You have a lot of cyber programs, and you could use students to help build that out. And I think it's just best, let the states, understand it's going to be uniform across the board what you need to do, but now they have the money and they can best utilize it to secure our municipalities, our agencies, and our citizens.
Great. Well, Kevin Powers, I really appreciated having you on here today and for this discussion.
Sure, my pleasure.
And we are recording this right now in September, so we're at the start of football season. I hope the Eagles have an excellent season this year.
Yeah, beat UCLA. We're playing them for Parents' Weekend this upcoming Saturday.
All right, well, go Eagles. My dad's a BC alum, so I feel a little bit akin to that football team still, even though I didn't go there myself. So.
Oh, there you go. Go Eagles is right.
All right, Kevin, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Joan.
And thanks to you for listening. If you enjoyed the conversation, we encourage you to like and comment and subscribe. And we'll see you next time for another episode of Security Sessions. For now, have a great day.